trying to work that out, so we'll get that to you the next day or so. If you'll give, take a look at it, let me know what you think.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
So again, division needs, so this is our criteria, and basically I'll just step through a couple of slides on our criteria, and I'll point out here, so we get 50% of the points in evaluating capital projects. And so you see we weight 30% on our first one, which is our Division of Aviation project rating, and then the others are 10 and 5 and 5, and I'll focus again my attention on those. So we're putting 30% of the division on the project rating. So this is a Division of Aviation airport development plan that we put together in 2003 and implemented in 2006. That's the core of this project rating system, and basically what it does, some of you probably are familiar with it, helped develop our TIP. But we prioritize from 1 to about 20 to 25 categories, prioritization of bringing the aircraft into your airspace, into your airport safely through your approaches, getting them through your runway protection zone, getting them through down your standards on your runway safety or around the runway environment, and then your pavement is the next category, which is basically taking care of what you've got. Then you start to look at expansion opportunities and other improvements that you can do that FAA is encouraging for safety. So that's how that works. The sources of information are your development plan, your airport layout plan, and our statewide system plan. So those are the kind of things that drive what projects should be looked at, considered, and needed for your airport. Okay, and so it'll be scored. This is a condensed version of those projects. So basically, you just go into this table with the type project it is, and you'll pull the points for that project, however it rates, and that's the score that it receives. So that's the DOA project point rating. The second one is the yes.
When you said tier 1 and tier 2, is that related to the
right here?
Yeah. What does the tier mean? Is that the economic development tier?
No. Not to be confused with that. Tier 1 is a minimum infrastructure, and tier 2 is recommended. So what we're saying here, to give you an example, in our guideline and our recommendations, we have a minimum tier of runway length for your type airport of 5,000 feet. So we encourage general aviation airports of this type to have a runway length of at least 5,000 feet. If you're at 4,200 feet and you're asking for a runway extension out to 5,000 for a pavement construction expansion of a runway, you're going to score in this category, right? If it's to take it beyond 5,000 feet, it would score in the lower category as a recommended. So we have minimum standards that we have for all of these categories for your airport. And so you go into the chart and pick the tier based on recommendation or the minimum criteria. So that's how it works. And we can share more of the details on this. That's not really the intent of this, but
that's the NCDOT points. The
that's
50%.
correct.
Is the RPO required for the local points also to follow this, or
No.
do they follow, say, economic development, anticipated growth, or other criteria?
They develop their own scoring criteria. Now, they can use all of this, or they can develop their own. But they have to do that, and they have to submit it to the department for approval. I think it's by the end of April is the requirement. So the RPOs, there's 17 of them, and there's 17 MPOs, and they're all working on this together, collectively, and then some individually to say, hey, these are our priorities, this is how we want to rate and score projects. So it's a tremendous undertaking as well. And then the division engineers are doing the same thing. They're developing their criteria. And so, again, for the RPO, you've got the different technical committees, and that division engineer should be heavily involved in that. I'll step aside off the slide for just a second. I mean, the real intent here, and again, you're doing it here, is that you are getting involved, plugging in with your division, your planner folks at that level, and also your RPOs. Your planning organizations are getting together and collaborating, and that's what it's going to really require. It's like, what are the priorities of your community, and where does the airport fall into that? And basically, you're going to have an allotment of points. The RPO is going to have an allotment of points, and the division is going to have an allotment of points that they can choose to put up against these projects. And they'll be putting points up against highway projects, rail projects, other bike and ped projects. They can choose to put their points up against that. up to the total of 50 points. The RPO will have 25 points they can put up, and the division engineers can put 25 points. So, so this is the DOA. Second was FAA, recognizing the Federal Aviation Regulation and their order of how they prioritize projects. We basically followed that. We're a block grant state, so we administer the federal funds to our general aviation airports as well. So we felt this criteria was sound enough, and we used it. And this is, again, just a snapshot matrix. It's a very long, like 4-page document. But again, you go in here for a type project, go over here, and you would pick out the points for that project. So that's the FAA criteria, and that's how they score projects on a national level. This is a couple of pages out of the order. It's referenced here. And this is the formula that they use, the actual priority equation formula. So you go into it with what type airport you are, and these are called K values, and these can change in the formula based off national goals and priorities. And for example, back in the late 90s, they had certain accidents that occurred, like the one in St. Louis with the American Airlines plane. That several people died where the plane went off the end of the runway, so they took a real emphasis on runway safety areas. The turf area off the end of your runways, getting those built to standards. So they can change their priorities and how projects score to help drive more money toward those type projects. The next and third criteria is what's called the local investment. We fund essentially most all of our projects at a state level are funded state-local. So it's 90% state funds to 10% local. Also, the federal funds that we award out in the form of grants are 90% federal, 10% local match to the project. So in this case, just using the example of $1 million, if a project was $1 million, this criteria says that if we award $900,000 in the locals, you've got your 10%, you would get 10 points toward that project. If the county in this case, if you could come up with more, in essence bringing more money to the table to get this $1 million project accomplished, the state only had to produce $800,000. This criteria is incentivizing more local involvement, local stakeholder participation. Again, it's helping us be able to spread those funds a little bit further. So you would get 20 more points toward that project. Again, now this is only 5% of the total score. We had to weight all of these to keep it in the 50 points. The Federal Investment Index applies to the commercial service airport, so I'll just kind of pass on over in the essence of time. And then the last one is aviation volume demand. This is our fourth and final criteria for GA airports. And this is taken into account. It's basically looking at your aircraft operations at the airport and job density. So it's really focusing on projects where there's more traffic and user demand. So the way we quantified that was we looked at based aircraft operations. We looked at IFR operations, which are reported to FAA. So how much IFR operations are you getting? And then how many employees are within a 10 nautical mile radius of the airport? And that was, again, quantifiable within GIS that we could come up with this data. So again, it's scored on a 100-point scale. It's 5%. This is the point system that we developed to weight these 4 pieces of criteria. There's the formula, how it's calculated. Again, it gives us a number from 1 to 100. Just the table on how we did it. Again, I'll be happy to share these slides if anybody wants them. And then this is just this happens to be Statesville, and that's the green shaded areas represent jobs basically around the airport. Okay, and then these last 2 slides here are just basically running a scoring example. We did one for statewide, regional, and division, and I'll just talk about this one here for division. This is a general aviation airport. This happened to be land for the runway protection zone. This is Cape Fear Regional down in Southport, Brunswick County, down south of Wilmington. The land was $2 million. Again, this is hypothetical, but it'll show you how the criteria works. The developed category here, it means it's in the RPZ in a required section that the airport should own. And so it scores a 71 out of our chart. So a pretty good score there for the first category. And again, it gets 30%. 30% of the 50 points is scored off that 71. The next is the FAA criteria, again right out of the matrix. So it scored a 33 from the FAA criteria. And then page 2, same project, same information. And then the state local, So the state is participating in a 90% fund, so they're kicking in 10%, so they would get 10 points for that project. And then lastly, as far as volume demand, they got an overall score of 64. So if you combine all those scores at the 5% and 5% and the 30 and 10, it gives a total score out of 50 points of 28.3. So that project scores a 28.3, and then the local folks down in the Cape Fear RPO, as well as Division 3 down there, have the opportunity to put 50 more points against that project. So it could conceivably go up to 78.3 points. Now, that project then would go into the big bucket for division projects to be considered for funding. So that takes it from planning then over to programming.
Will it compete within just Division 3?
That's correct.
Okay, not statewide.
It would not compete for all.
Okay, just within Division 3.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. And so, and just big picture, high level, over 10 years, DOT projects about $15 billion over 10 years that would go toward all these programs. And so under statewide, 40% of that money would go here, 30% here, and 30% here. So you can quickly do the math. This equates to about $4.5 billion in this bucket for all modes over 10 years. So you divide that out, and that comes out to be about $34, $35 million per division. And a division is your 6-county DOT division, is what they're calling a division.
Which airports are in our division, Bobby, or Deanna, or
I've got a great map showing that. Let me see. I'll probably get a few copies as well. These are actual maps that was handed out at the airport forum. So I've got some extras here for the gentleman. Just pass them to the run out basically. You're in the isothermal RPO, and it appears that you're the only general aviation airport in that RPO. Now you are, in terms of division, you're in Highway Division or DOT Division 13, and I think Hickory is in that division, and I think Morganton Lenore falls into that. I'm not certain. And Asheville does. Asheville, again, is a regional airport.
So we don't really compete with Asheville for the pot of funding, but we would compete with Hickory and Morganton, is that what I'm hearing you say?
Hickory and Morganton Lenore are general aviation airports. So compete may not be the exact right word, because if they have sound projects that you have presented to the division, and again, there's no airports competing in the RPO. So, but for the division engineer, again, he'll have a certain allotment of points, and he can decide, you know, again, based on the soundness of the project and the need of the project, he can award some of those points toward that project. So whether he's going to limit his number of points to so many airport projects or not, that's their development of their criteria. But again, it's really, in my view, it's the vision and the mission of the airport, and then how well you recognize the need and what you're trying to do, and you communicate that with the division as well as the RPO to get their buy-in and their support.
So let me, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. The overall 100 points relates to any particular project that is funded by NCDOT.
Correct.
So if an airport project received 28 points through the various sources, and a road project received 29 points, I guess this is where I'm getting confused, because there's aviation-focused money, and I guess no longer the state money is aviation-focused, but only the federal money is, because you can't put aviation money on a road project. Again, I'm confused on a little bit on how that plays out. I'm sure you...
The Highway Trust Fund money is considered for all capital projects. All capital projects across the board, all transportation projects will compete. with one another.
Okay.
So roads, ferries, and there.
Right, there's no other state in the country doing this.
So roads, ferry, air, trails, bikes and peds, everything.
Sometimes the leading edge is the bleeding edge.
Well, that's okay. I'm just trying to make
So-
sure we understand where we stand on things go. We're looking at projects.
Right. So no, you're exactly right. So it's a land project or a runway project is going to be competing for a new road project or again a rail project or a bike and ped project, things of that nature. In this quantified measure. So the 28.3 plus the division points plus the local RPO or MPO points will collectively give you a score for that project to compete with all other projects of all modes. And one thing that your question reminded me of